My name is Jasmine, and I am 32 years old. What should have been the happiest day of my life turned into a nightmare when I walked into my fiancé, Martin's hotel suite, to surprise him before our $250,000 wedding. Nothing prepared me for seeing him tangled in bedsheets with Sophie, my maid of honor and best friend since college. Instead of screaming or crying, I made one phone call that changed everything. Before I continue this story, I would love to know where you are watching from. Drop a comment below, hit that like button, and subscribe if you want more stories about overcoming betrayal. I am a Boston native who worked incredibly hard to graduate from Harvard Law with honors. My career as a corporate attorney had been my main focus until I met Martin at a charity gala 3 years ago. He stood out immediately with his confident smile and perfect tailored suit. When he approached me with 2 glasses of champagne and a witty comment about the abstract art installation everyone was pretending to understand, I felt an immediate connection. Martin came from old money, with a family real estate empire stretching back 3 generations. A Princeton graduate with striking blue eyes and a disarming laugh, he represented everything I thought I wanted. Our connection was immediate and intense. Within weeks, we were inseparable. Our courtship was like something from a romance novel. Martin took me to exclusive restaurants where the chef would come to our table to prepare special dishes not on the menu. He surprised me with weekend trips to New York City to see Broadway shows from private boxes. For our first anniversary, we spent 2 weeks traveling through Italy and Greece, staying in luxury hotels and drinking wine as the Mediterranean sunset painted the sky orange and pink. The expensive gifts started early: a platinum bracelet for my birthday, diamond earrings just because it was Tuesday, a designer purse I had casually mentioned liking, but I told myself I was attracted to Martin, not his money. I had my own successful career and financial independence. What I loved was his ambition, his intelligence, and how he made me feel special. Martin's family was Boston aristocracy. His father, William, was a powerful businessman with political connections stretching to Washington. His mother, Margaret, was the perfect socialite, chairing charity boards and hosting exclusive events at their Beacon Hill mansion. The pressure on Martin to marry the right kind of woman was immense, though never explicitly stated in my presence. When Martin first introduced me to his parents at their summer home in Newport, I felt the scrutiny in Margaret's eyes as she noted my off-the-rack dress and simple jewelry. William questioned me extensively about my family background and career ambitions. Though they were polite, I sensed their reservation. I was accomplished, but not from their social circle. "They just need time to know you like I do," Martin assured me after that first uncomfortable meeting. "Once they see how amazing you are, they will love you." My best friend Sophie knew all my insecurities about fitting into Martin's world. We had been roommates at Boston University before I transferred to Harvard, and she had been my rock through every crisis. When my father had a heart attack during my second year of law school, Sophie drove me home and stayed with my family for 3 days. When my ex-boyfriend cheated on me with my coworker, Sophie showed up with ice cream and wine, letting me cry on her shoulder all night. "You deserve someone like Martin," Sophie told me repeatedly. "Stop worrying about his family. You are smart, beautiful, and successful. Any family would be lucky to have you." Sophie came from a similar middle-class background as me, working as a marketing executive for a cosmetics company. She was stunning with her long blonde hair and green eyes, but had struggled with her own relationship issues over the years. She dated a string of unavailable men, each relationship ending in predictable heartbreak. I always tried to be there for her the way she was for me. The proposal came during our trip to Santorini. Martin arranged a private dinner on the terrace of our luxury suite overlooking the caldera as the sun set over the Aegean Sea. When he dropped to one knee and opened a Tiffany box containing a 5-carat diamond ring, I gasped. The ring was extravagant, almost too large for my taste, but the look of love in his eyes made me tear up as I said yes. The wedding planning process quickly became all-consuming. Martin insisted on a lavish event at the Fairmont Copley Plaza, one of Boston's most prestigious hotels. The guest list grew to 500 people, most of whom I had never met. The budget expanded to $1.4 million, with Martin's family covering most expenses despite my protests that we could have something more modest. "This is not just about us, Jasmine," Martin said. "This is also about family connections and business relationships. My parents have waited a long time to see me married." Looking back, I should have noticed the red flags. Martin began working later, sometimes not returning my calls for hours. He changed the password on his phone, keeping it face down when we were together. There were unexplained weekends away for business meetings that seemed vague when I asked for details. But I was so caught up in wedding preparations and my own busy career that I pushed aside my concerns. Sophie enthusiastically took on her maid of honor duties, sometimes with surprising intensity. She had opinions about everything from my wedding dress to the floral arrangements. She insisted on accompanying me to every vendor meeting, sometimes even scheduling appointments without consulting me first. When I questioned her once about overstepping, she teared up. "I just want your day to be perfect," she said. "Since I might never have this myself, at least I can help make your wedding dreams come true." How could I argue with such devotion? I felt guilty for questioning her motives and allowed her continued involvement, even when she began suggesting changes to decisions Martin and I had already made. My parents expressed mild concern about the speed and scale of the wedding plans. My father, a retired high school principal with traditional values, worried that the extravagance might be setting unrealistic expectations for our marriage. My mother wondered quietly why we needed such an elaborate event to celebrate our love. But I dismissed their concerns as generational differences, assuring them this was what Martin and I both wanted. As the wedding day approached, my excitement mixed with increasing anxiety. Martin seemed distracted during our final planning meetings, checking his phone constantly and deferring most decisions to me, or increasingly, to Sophie. They had developed an unexpected rapport with inside jokes I did not understand, and opinions that suddenly aligned on issues they had previously disagreed about. "You are lucky your fiancé and maid of honor get along so well," our wedding planner commented. "Usually there is some tension there." I nodded and smiled, ignoring the small voice in my head that whispered something was not quite right. After all, in just one more week, Martin and I would be husband and wife, beginning the perfect life we had planned together. I woke up at 6:30 in the morning on my wedding day, even before my alarm. Sunlight streamed through the curtains of my luxury suite at the Fairmont Copley Plaza, and for a moment, I just lay there trying to absorb the reality that by sunset, I would be Mrs. Martin Whitfield. The heavy diamond engagement ring caught the light as I stretched, sending prisms dancing across the ceiling. The hotel had provided a complimentary bottle of Dom Perignon, and my bridesmaids and I had planned a champagne breakfast to start the celebrations. My sister Natalie was already awake, arranging pastries on the dining table of our suite when I emerged from the bedroom. "The bride is up," she announced, giving me a tight hug. "How did you sleep?" "Surprisingly well," I admitted, pouring myself a cup of coffee from the silver service. "Where is everyone else?" "Mom went to check on the flowers in the ballroom. The bridesmaids should be here any minute." Natalie paused, looking around. "No word from Sophie yet." I checked my phone. No messages. "That's strange. She was supposed to be here first. Let me text her." I sent a quick message. "Morning. Where are you?" "Breakfast is ready." The message showed as delivered, but not read. I tried not to worry. Perhaps she had overslept after the rehearsal dinner last night. Within the hour, my suite was buzzing with activity. My mother returned, with reports that the ballroom looked spectacular, with thousands of white roses and crystal decorations catching the morning light. 3 bridesmaids arrived together, already giddy with excitement and mimosas. The hairstylist and makeup artist began setting up their stations near the windows for the best natural light. Only Sophie remained absent. "Has anyone heard from Sophie?" I asked the room at large. My bridesmaids exchanged glances and shook their heads. "I saw her at the bar after you left last night," my cousin Rachel offered. "She was having a drink with your future brother-in-law. I think she said she was just going up to her room after that." I called Sophie's cell phone, but it went straight to voicemail. An uncomfortable feeling settled in my stomach, but I pushed it away. This was my wedding day. Everything would be perfect. Sophie saw me first. Her eyes widened in horror, her mouth forming a perfect O of shock. She scrambled to cover herself with the sheet, pushing away from Martin as if distance now could somehow erase what I had witnessed. "Jasmine!" Martin gasped, his face draining of color. He jumped up, clutching a pillow in front of him in a pathetic attempt at modesty. This is not what it looks like. The absurdity of his statement might have made me laugh in different circumstances. What else could this possibly be? My fiancé and maid of honor, naked in bed together, hours before our wedding. I couldn't speak. My throat had closed, my lungs refusing to draw a breath. I stood in the doorway, still holding the stupid gift box, staring at the two people I had trusted most in the world. "Jazz, please," Sophie sobbed, tears already streaming down her face. "I'm so sorry. We never meant for this to happen. It just did." Martin was scrambling for his boxer shorts, nearly falling as he attempted to put them on while keeping his eyes on me, as if I might suddenly attack. "Baby, listen to me," he pleaded. "This was just one mistake, one stupid mistake. It doesn't mean anything." I finally found my voice, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. "How long?" They exchanged a quick glance that told me everything I needed to know. "How long?" I repeated louder this time. "It only happened a few times," Martin said quickly. "It doesn't change how I feel about you. I still want to marry you today. I still love you." Sophie was fully crying now, her mascara running down her cheeks. "I was just helping him with wedding nerves," she offered weakly. "It got out of hand. It's my fault, not his." The audacity of their excuses broke through my shock, igniting a flash of anger. They were trying to minimize this, to suggest it was a meaningless indiscretion, rather than a profound betrayal by the two people who should have been most loyal to me. 500 guests are downstairs," Martin said, moving toward me with his hands outstretched. "Your parents have flown in relatives from across the country. My family's business associates are here from Europe. We can get past this, Jasmine. We can still have our perfect day." I backed away from his approach, bumping into the doorframe. "Your family's reputation," I said flatly. "That's what you're worried about." "No, I mean, yes. But it's not just that." He ran his hands through his disheveled hair. "Think about it logically. We've invested too much in this relationship, in this day, to throw it all away. We can work through this. Couples overcome worse all the time." Sophie nodded eagerly from the bed, clutching the sheet to her chest. "We can fix this, Jazz. I'll do anything. I'll step down as maid of honor. Jessica can take my place. No one has to know." Their desperate attempts to salvage the unsalvageable might have been comical if they weren't so heartbreaking. I looked from Martin to Sophie and back again. These two people I had loved and trusted completely. Now they were strangers to me, revealing versions of themselves I had never known existed. Without a word, I turned and walked out of the bedroom, dropping the gift box on the floor behind me. I heard Martin calling my name, his footsteps hurrying after me, but I was already moving across the living room toward the exit. "Jasmine, wait," he called, grabbing my arm as I reached for the door. "Please, let's talk about this. Don't do something you'll regret." I looked down at his hand on my arm, then up at his face, the face I had thought I would wake up to every morning for the rest of my life. "Let go of me," I said quietly. Something in my tone must have frightened him because he released me immediately, stepping back with his hands raised in surrender. "Just promise me you won't make a scene," he begged. "My family. They can't find out like this. Let me tell them in my own way. We can announce that you're sick, postpone the wedding. Please, Jasmine." I opened the door and walked out without another word, letting it click shut behind me. The security guard was still at his post, now looking at me with concern. "Is everything all right, Miss Carter?" he asked. I nodded mechanically and moved past him to the elevator. As the doors closed, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the mirrored wall. My carefully styled hair was still perfect. My face showed no tears, no visible distress. I looked exactly like a bride on her wedding morning, except for the emptiness in my eyes. I managed to return to my suite without encountering any wedding guests. Inside, the preparation frenzy continued. Bridesmaids were getting final makeup touches. My sister was steaming a wrinkle from her dress. My mother was on the phone with my aunt, discussing transportation from the hotel to the church. No one immediately noticed my return or my expression. I slipped past them into the large marble bathroom and locked the door behind me. Only then did the full impact of what I had witnessed hit me. My knees buckled, and I sank to the cold tile floor, wrapping my arms around myself as the first sob escaped. The pain was physical, a crushing weight on my chest that made breathing difficult. Images flashed through my mind. Martin and Sophie together in bed, her blonde hair across his chest, his hands on her body. How many times had they been together while I was planning our wedding? How many lies had they told me, both of them, while looking me in the eye? I don't know how long I sat there on the bathroom floor crying silently. Eventually, a knock on the door pulled me back to the present moment. "Jasmine, are you in there?" It was Clara, the wedding coordinator. "We need to start getting you into your dress. The photographer is ready for the pre-ceremony shots." I need a few minutes, I called back, trying to keep my voice steady. Bride moment. I'll be right out. Of course. Take your time. Her footsteps moved away from the door. I stood up and looked at myself in the mirror. My eyes were red and swollen, my makeup ruined by tears. But as I stared at my reflection, something shifted inside me. The overwhelming pain began to transform into something else. Anger. Cold, clarifying anger. The wedding coordinator, Clara, arrived with her clipboard and timeline, efficiently checking off morning tasks. The florist is done. The string quartet will arrive at 2, and the photographer wants to start pre-ceremony shots at 11:00. She looked around the suite. Where is your maid of honor? She needs to be in the first round of hair and makeup. I'm not sure, I admitted. She's not answering her phone. Clara frowned. Well, we need to stay on schedule. Let me know when she arrives. For now, let's start with your mother and sister. As the morning progressed, the absence of my maid of honor became increasingly conspicuous. Sophie's bridesmaid dress, a floor-length silk gown in pale blue, hung untouched in the closet. Her bridesmaid gift, a monogrammed jewelry box containing pearl earrings to wear during the ceremony, sat unopened on the dresser. Every time my phone chimed, I lunged for it, only to be disappointed by wedding day wishes from friends or updates from vendors. Even more concerning, Martin had not responded to my good morning text. I had sent a sweet message telling him how excited I was to walk down the aisle to him in just a few hours. The message showed as delivered but unread, just like my texts to Sophie. Maybe they're both just busy with last-minute details, my sister suggested, but her tone lacked conviction. By 10:30, my hair was styled in an elegant updo with a few loose curls framing my face. The makeup artist had created a natural but enhanced look that made my eyes appear larger and my skin luminous. My mother teared up when she saw me. You look so beautiful, Jasmine, she whispered, careful not to smudge her own makeup. I'm so proud of you. I smiled, but my mind was elsewhere. Where was Sophie, and why was Martin not responding to my messages? I think I'm going to bring Martin his wedding gift, I announced suddenly, standing up. My mother looked alarmed, but it's bad luck for the groom to see the bride before the ceremony. I laughed, trying to sound more carefree than I felt. I'm not going to let him see me, Mom. I'll just leave the gift with him. I had this custom watch engraved, and I want him to have it before the ceremony. What I didn't say was that I needed reassurance that everything was okay. The growing silence from both my fiancé and best friend was becoming impossible to ignore. I think you should wait, my mother cautioned. Everything is so busy right now. Clara wants you in your dress for photos in 30 minutes. This will only take a moment, I insisted, already slipping on a hotel robe over my silk slip. Martin's suite is just 2 floors up. I'll be right back. Before anyone could protest further, I grabbed the small wrapped box containing the platinum watch I had splurged on and headed for the door. In the hallway, I took a deep breath, trying to calm my racing heart. I was being silly. There was surely a simple explanation for the unusual silence this morning. As I stepped into the elevator and pressed the button for the presidential suite floor, I had no idea that my entire life was about to change. No idea that in just minutes, the beautiful future I had planned would shatter into 1,000 painful pieces. The presidential suite occupied the corner of the top floor, offering panoramic views of the Boston skyline. A hotel security guard stood near the elevator, but he recognized me immediately and nodded as I approached. Good morning, Miss Carter. Big day today, he said with a smile. Yes, it is, I replied, trying to sound casual as I walked past him toward Martin's suite. As I approached the door, I heard muffled sounds from inside, voices, though I couldn't make out words, and music playing softly. I stood there for a moment, the gift box clutched in my suddenly sweaty hands. Part of me wanted to turn back, to return to the safe bubble of wedding preparations downstairs, but a stronger instinct pushed me forward. I pulled the key card Martin had given me from my robe pocket. In case you need to find me before the ceremony, he had said with a wink when he handed it to me yesterday. I hesitated only briefly before sliding it into the lock. The light turned green, and I pushed the door open as quietly as possible, wanting to surprise him. The suite's living room was in disarray. An open bottle of champagne sat on the coffee table beside 2 half-empty glasses. Martin's tuxedo jacket was draped over a chair, and his bow tie lay on the floor. Something else caught my eye, something that made my stomach clench. A woman's stiletto heel kicked off carelessly by the couch, a shoe I recognized immediately because I had helped pick it out. Sophie's maid of honor shoes. My heart began to pound so loudly I was sure it could be heard throughout the hotel. The muffled sounds I had heard from the hallway were clearer now, coming from behind the closed double doors that led to the bedroom, sounds that left little to the imagination. I stood frozen, the gift box now hanging limply from my fingers. I could still leave, could still pretend I had never come up here, never seen the evidence scattered across the room, could go through with the wedding, smile for photos, dance our first dance, cut the 5-tier cake, pretend everything was fine. But I knew I would never forgive myself. With legs that felt disconnected from my body, I moved across the living room toward those closed doors. Each step required enormous effort, as if I were walking through deep water. When I reached the doors, I paused, my hand on the ornate handle. Then, with a surge of determination, I pushed both doors open at once. The scene before me seared instantly into my memory, a tableau I knew would haunt me for years to come. Martin and Sophie in bed together, tangled in expensive sheets. Her blonde hair spread across pillows monogrammed with his initials. They were so engrossed in each other that it took several seconds before they realized they were no longer alone. Martin's desperate plea echoed in my mind. My family can't find out like this. His concern had not been for my feelings, my humiliation, my pain. It had been for his family's reputation, for the potential embarrassment they would suffer. I remembered a conversation from months ago, Martin explaining why we needed such an extravagant wedding. His father, William, had political aspirations, connections he cultivated carefully. The wedding was as much a networking event as a celebration of our love. The guest list included state senators, federal judges, business leaders, even a former governor. The Whitfield family name meant everything to them. Their standing in Boston society was the foundation of their real estate empire. Reputation was currency in their world, and Martin had always been acutely aware of this fact, careful never to create public scenes or scandals that might reflect poorly on the family. And now he had created the ultimate scandal, betraying his bride with her maid of honor on their wedding day. But he expected me to help him hide it, to protect him and his family from the consequences of his actions. My legal training kicked in, my mind shifting from emotional response to strategic thinking. What did I want from this situation? What outcome would allow me to maintain my dignity and ensure that Martin and Sophie faced appropriate consequences for their betrayal? I pulled out my phone and called my father. Despite my mother's more visible role in wedding preparations, it was my father, the retired judge with his quiet wisdom, whose advice I trusted most. "Dad," I said when he answered, my voice breaking slightly, "I need to talk to you." "What's wrong, sweetheart? You sound upset." Briefly, I explained what I had discovered. My father listened without interrupting, then sighed heavily. "I am so sorry, Jasmine. What do you need from me?" "What should I do?" I asked, suddenly feeling like a little girl again, seeking my father's guidance. "If you're asking for my official advice, I would suggest canceling the ceremony immediately. We can make an announcement about irreconcilable differences. Keep it private, dignified, avoid the public spectacle." I considered this practical approach. It would be the sensible thing to do, the kind thing even, minimize the drama, protect everyone involved from public humiliation. "And if I don't want to keep it private?" I asked. My father was silent for a moment. "Then that is your right too. You are the wronged party here. Just be sure that whatever you do, you can live with it afterward. Revenge might feel satisfying in the moment, but it rarely brings lasting peace." "Thank you, Dad. I love you." "I love you too. Whatever you decide, your mother and I are behind you 100%. After ending the call, I turned back to the mirror. With steady hands, I washed my face, removing all traces of ruined makeup. Then, I reapplied foundation, concealer, blush. I fixed my eyeliner and mascara, added lipstick. Looking at myself critically, no one would guess I had been crying just minutes ago. I knew what I wanted to do. Justice required accountability. Not just private accountability between Martin and me, but public accountability that matched the public nature of our planned celebration. The Whitfield family valued their reputation above all else. It was only fitting that reputation should be the currency of consequences. I changed out of my robe into a simple blue dress I had packed for the post-wedding brunch. Then I sat down at the desk in the bathroom and wrote a brief note to my bridesmaids explaining that I needed 30 minutes alone and asking them to wait in the hotel lobby. I slipped the note under the door and waited until I heard them reluctantly gathering their things and leaving. Once alone in the suite, I picked up my phone again. With surprisingly steady fingers, I dialed Margaret Whitfield's number. She answered on the second ring. "Jasmine, darling, is everything all right? It's bad luck for us to speak before the ceremony." "You know, Margaret," I said, my voice calm and professional, the same tone I used in difficult client meetings. "Something has come up that requires immediate attention from you and William. A situation involving Martin that cannot wait until after the ceremony." "What is it? Is Martin all right?" Concern colored her voice. "He's physically fine," I assured her. "But this is a sensitive matter that needs to be addressed in person. Could you please come to his suite immediately? It would be best if William, Catherine, and Michael came as well." Catherine and Michael were Martin's sister and brother, both scheduled to be part of the wedding party. "You're scaring me, Jasmine," Margaret said. "Just tell me what is happening." "I prefer to explain in person. Please trust me that this is urgent and requires the family's immediate attention." After a moment's hesitation, she agreed. "We will be there in 5 minutes." I ended the call and took a deep breath. The confrontations ahead would be difficult, painful, potentially explosive, but it was necessary for my own healing, for justice, and yes, for a particular kind of closure I needed before I could walk away from this relationship and this day with my dignity intact. With one last glance in the mirror, I left my suite and headed back toward the presidential suite where my former future awaited. I arrived in the corridor outside Martin's suite just as the elevator doors opened, revealing his family. Margaret Whitfield stepped out first, elegant in a pale pink mother-of-the-groom dress, diamonds glittering at her throat and ears. William followed, imposing in his bespoke tuxedo, his silver hair perfectly styled. Behind them came Catherine, Martin's younger sister, and Michael, his older brother, both looking confused and slightly irritated at the unexpected summons. "Jasmine!" Margaret exclaimed, hurrying toward me. "What on earth is going on? Why are you dressed like that? Where is your wedding gown?" "What is this urgent situation that could not wait until after the ceremony?" William demanded, checking his gold watch with impatience. "We have guests arriving already." I met their concerned gazes with a composed expression. "Thank you all for coming so quickly. I apologize for the mysterious nature of my call, but I believe it will become clear momentarily." "Are you getting cold feet?" Catherine asked, a slight edge to her voice. "Because really, this seems quite dramatic." Michael, always the more perceptive of Martin's siblings, studied my face carefully. "Something is wrong," he said quietly. "Really wrong?" I nodded slightly in acknowledgement of his insight, then turned to face the suite door. I held up the key card, looking back at the family. "Shall we?" Margaret's perfectly manicured hand fluttered to her throat. "You want us to go into Martin's room? But why? Is he ill?" "He's not ill," I said, inserting the key card into the lock. "But there is something you all need to see." Before sliding the card, I knocked firmly on the door. There was a moment of silence. Then Martin's voice called out, "Who is it?" "It's me. With your family," I replied clearly. I heard muffled cursing, then frantic movement inside the room. Without waiting for a response, I slid the key card, pushed the door open, and gestured for the Whitfields to enter. The living room looked slightly more orderly than when I had left it earlier. The champagne glasses had been cleared away, though the bottle remained. Martin's jacket and bow tie were no longer visible, but Sophie's shoe still lay near the couch, a damning piece of evidence that Margaret's sharp eyes immediately noticed. Is that a woman's shoe?" she asked, her voice rising slightly. Before I could answer, Martin appeared from the bedroom, hastily dressed in pants and a partially buttoned shirt. His hair was wet from a recent shower, his face pale with dread as he took in the sight of his entire family, standing in his suite. "Mother, father," he stammered, "what are you doing here?" "Jasmine said there was an urgent situation," William replied, his eyes narrowing as he looked between his son and me. "She was quite insistent we come immediately." Martin shot me a look of pure panic. "There's been a misunderstanding," he began. But I was already moving past him toward the bedroom. "The misunderstanding is mine, I think," I said calmly. "I misunderstood the nature of your relationship with my maid of honor." I pushed open the bedroom doors to reveal Sophie sitting on the edge of the bed, dressed now in last night's cocktail dress, her face blotchy from crying. She looked up in horror as the entire Whitfield family filed into the room behind me. The tableau of shock was exactly as I had anticipated. Margaret gasped audibly, stumbling backward until William caught her elbow to steady her. Catherine's mouth fell open, her eyes widening in scandalized understanding. Michael let out a nervous laugh that quickly died when no one joined him. Martin stood frozen, trapped between his family and his lover, unable to concoct a plausible explanation for the scene before them. "No," Margaret whispered, shaking her head in denial. "No, this cannot be happening." William's face had turned an alarming shade of red, a vein pulsing visibly at his temple. "Martin," he said, his voice dangerously quiet, "explain yourself." Martin raised his hands in a placating gesture. "I can explain. This is not what it looks like." "Really?" I interjected. "Because it looks exactly like I found you in bed with my maid of honor 3 hours before our wedding ceremony." Sophie had begun sobbing again, her shoulders shaking as she stared down at her lap, unable to meet anyone's eyes. "Is this true?" William demanded, his voice rising with each word. "Is this true, Martin?" When Martin failed to respond, William exploded. 500 people are downstairs, senators, judges, business partners. Do you have any idea what this will do to our family name? To our reputation in this city? Margaret sank into a chair, her face ashen. "All those guests," she moaned. "What will we tell them? How will we explain this?" Catherine moved to her mother's side, patting her shoulder awkwardly, while continuing to stare at her brother with a mixture of disgust and fascination. Michael remained by the door, arms crossed, his expression shifting from shock to something that looked almost like grim satisfaction. Martin finally found his voice. "It was a mistake, a terrible mistake, but no one else knows yet. We can fix this. Jasmine and I can talk privately. We can still have the ceremony." He turned to me, his eyes pleading. "Please, Jasmine, we can work through this. Don't throw away everything we've built because of one indiscretion." I looked at him, this man I had planned to spend my life with, and felt nothing but a cold, clear certainty that I was seeing him truly for the first time. Not the charming, successful man I had fallen in love with, but the weak, selfish person who stood before me, now willing to begin our marriage with a foundation of lies. "One indiscretion," I repeated softly. "Is that what you call sleeping with my best friend on our wedding day?" Martin glanced nervously at his father, whose face had grown impossibly redder. "It's not like we planned this," he said desperately. "It just happened." "Things like this don't just happen," William growled. "Not on your wedding day. Not with the bride's maid of honor." "How long has this been going on?" Margaret asked, finding her voice again. Her shock was giving way to calculation, her socialite training kicking in as she began to assess the damage control required. Martin and Sophie exchanged a quick glance that did not go unnoticed by anyone in the room. "How long?" William echoed, stepping toward his son menacingly. "It doesn't matter how long," Martin said, backing away slightly. "What matters is what we do now, how we handle this situation." I turned to face the family, standing straight and composed despite the chaos swirling around me. "I thought you should all know before the ceremony," I said simply. "I thought you deserved to understand why there will not be a wedding today." Margaret stood up suddenly, moving toward me with outstretched hands. "Jasmine, Shadir, let's not be hasty. Perhaps you and Martin need some time to discuss this privately. These things happen in relationships. Marriages have overcome worse." William nodded eagerly. "Yes, perhaps a postponement rather than a cancellation. We could tell the guests you are ill. Reschedule for a month from now, after you and Martin have had counseling." I looked from Margaret to William and back again, amazed at their ability to prioritize appearances over integrity. Even in this moment of crisis, they were not concerned with the pain their son had caused me, only with managing the public relations disaster that loomed before them. "I appreciate your concern," I said, my attorney voice firmly in place. "But there will be no postponement. There will be no wedding. Not today, not ever." Martin moved to my side, reaching for my hand, which I pulled away before he could touch me. "Jasmine, please, let's talk alone. I know I made a terrible mistake, but I love you. I want to marry you." I turned to him, meeting his desperate gaze directly. "No, Martin, you don't love me. If you loved me, you wouldn't have betrayed me, especially not with my best friend. What you love is the idea of me, the perfect corporate attorney wife who looks good on your arm at social events and impresses your business associates. But that's not love. That's acquisition." He flinched as if I had slapped him. Behind him, Sophie had stopped crying and was now watching the scene with wide, frightened eyes. "I thought you should all know," I repeated to the family. "I'm going to go downstairs now and inform our guests that the wedding has been canceled." "You can't do that," Margaret cried, genuine panic in her voice. "Think of the scandal. Think of what people will say." William stepped forward, his businessman instincts taking over. "Miss Carter, perhaps we can come to an arrangement. A financial settlement in exchange for your discretion in how this matter is handled publicly. I stared at him in disbelief. Are you trying to buy my silence, Mr. Whitfield? I'm trying to protect my family's reputation, he replied stiffly. A reputation we have built over generations. Surely you can understand that has value. Indeed it does, I agreed, which is why I will be addressing the guests personally. They deserve an explanation for why they came all this way for a wedding that will not take place. You wouldn't dare, William said, his voice dropping to a threatening whisper. I'm afraid she would, Michael interjected unexpectedly. And frankly, Father, I don't blame her. All eyes turned to the elder Whitfield's son, who had remained quiet until now. Michael shrugged. Martin screwed up monumentally. He should face the consequences. Martin turned on his brother furiously. Shut up, Michael. You have no idea what you're talking about. I know you've been sleeping with her maid of honor, Michael replied evenly, nodding toward Sophie. For how long exactly? Because based on your reaction, this wasn't a one-time thing. The room fell silent as all eyes turned back to Martin, who looked trapped. How long, Martin? I asked again, my voice steady despite the pain lancing through me. Martin ran his hands through his hair, a gesture of frustration I had once found endearing. Now it just seemed theatrical. A few months, he finally admitted, since the engagement party. 9 months. They had been betraying me for 9 months, while I planned our wedding, while Sophie helped me choose my dress, while Martin and I put a deposit on a house in Brookline. It didn't mean anything, Sophie suddenly spoke up, her voice small but desperate. It was just physical. We never meant to hurt you, Jazz. Yet here we are, I replied, turning to look at my former best friend. You, sleeping with my fiancé on my wedding day. Me, discovering you both in bed together. Seems like hurt was inevitable, don't you think? She dropped her gaze, unable to meet my eyes. This is ridiculous, William declared. We are wasting time. Martin, get dressed properly. We need to manage this situation immediately. He turned to me, his expression stern. Miss Carter, I understand you are upset, but public humiliation serves no one. Let us handle this with the discretion it deserves. Discretion, I repeated. You mean sweeping it under the rug? Protecting Martin from the consequences of his actions? Protecting your family name at my expense? I'm offering you compensation, William reminded me. I don't want your money, I said. I want accountability. Martin suddenly lunged forward, grabbing my arm. You can't do this to me, he hissed, his charming facade completely gone now. You can't humiliate me in front of everyone we know. I looked pointedly at his hand on my arm until he released me, then reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. Actually, I can, and I should mention that this entire conversation has been recorded. The blood drained from Martin's face. You what? I held up my phone, showing the active recording app on the screen. I'm an attorney, Martin. I believe in evidence. William stepped forward menacingly. That's illegal. You can't record people without their consent. Actually, Massachusetts is a one-party consent state, I corrected him. As long as one party to the conversation consents to the recording, it's perfectly legal, and I consent. Margaret moaned softly, collapsing back into her chair. We are ruined, she whispered. Not necessarily, I said, slipping my phone back into my pocket. I have no intention of releasing this recording unless you force my hand. All I want is to address our guests honestly and then move on with my life. I will destroy your career, William threatened, his voice low and dangerous. I have connections throughout Boston's legal community. You will never work in this city again. Michael stepped between his father and me. That's enough, Dad. Your threats aren't helping the situation. I nodded my thanks to Michael, then turned to leave. I had said what I came to say, revealed what needed to be revealed. Now it was time to face the waiting guests and end this chapter of my life with whatever dignity I could salvage. Jasmine, wait! Martin called, his voice breaking. Please. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I paused at the door but did not turn around. So am I, Martin. So am I. With that, I walked out, leaving the Whitfield family to deal with the wreckage their son had created. In the hallway outside Martin's suite, I took a moment to compose myself. The confrontation had gone more or less as I had anticipated, but that didn't make it any less painful. My hands were shaking slightly, adrenaline coursing through my system. I was about to walk toward the elevator when the suite door opened behind me. I turned, half expecting to see Martin, but it was Michael who stepped into the hallway. Jasmine, wait, he said, closing the door behind him. I just want to say I'm sorry. What my brother did to you is unforgivable. I studied his face, looking for the family resemblance that had always been so obvious between the Whitfield brothers. Same blue eyes, same strong jaw. But Michael's expression held genuine regret, something I hadn't seen from any other member of the family. "Thank you," I said simply. "What are you going to do now?" he asked. "Exactly what I said. I'm going to tell our guests the truth, or at least enough of it that they understand why there will be no wedding today." Michael nodded slowly. "I think that's fair. For what it's worth, I support your decision. Martin has gotten away with too much for too long because our parents always clean up his messes." Before I could respond, the suite door opened again and Margaret emerged, her face tight with controlled panic. "Jasmine, please," she said, approaching me with outstretched hands. "Let's talk about this rationally." "I believe I've been extremely rational, considering the circumstances," I replied. "You don't understand what's at stake here," she insisted. "William is being considered for a federal appointment. This scandal could ruin everything he's worked for." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, genuinely meaning it despite everything. "But your husband is not responsible for Martin's actions. Neither are you." "We are family," she said, as if that explained everything. "His mistakes reflect on all of us." "Perhaps that's something you should discuss with your son," I suggested. "Not with me." Margaret's composure slipped for a moment, revealing the desperation beneath. "Please, Jasmine, I'm begging you, don't destroy our family over this." I felt a flash of anger at her framing. "I'm not destroying anything, Margaret. Martin and Sophie did that when they decided to betray my trust. All I'm doing is refusing to lie about it." The elevator doors opened, and my wedding coordinator, Clara, stepped out looking harried. She stopped short when she saw me standing with Margaret and Michael. "There you are," she exclaimed. "Everyone's been looking for you. Your mother is beside herself with worry. The hair and makeup people are waiting, and the photographer has been ready for over an hour." I took a deep breath. "Clara, I need you to gather the immediate family and wedding party in the Venetian room immediately. There has been a change of plans." Clara's professional smile faltered. "What kind of change?" "The wedding is canceled," I said flatly. Her clipboard lowered slowly as she processed this information. "Canceled? But everything is ready. The flowers, the cake, the string quartet is already playing in the ballroom." "Nevertheless, there will be no ceremony today," I said firmly. "Please gather everyone in the Venetian room in 15 minutes. I will make an announcement." Clara looked from me to Margaret, clearly hoping for contradiction or clarification. When none came, she nodded slowly. "I'll take care of it right away." As she hurried back to the elevator, Margaret made one last attempt. "Jasmine, I'm imploring you to reconsider. Think about what you're about to do." "I have thought about it, Margaret. I've thought about little else for the past hour, and I'm certain this is the right course of action." Michael placed a gentle hand on his mother's shoulder. "Mom, it's over. Let it go." Margaret shrugged off his hand, her eyes never leaving my face. "You will regret this vindictiveness," she said, her socialite mask slipping to reveal the steel beneath. "The Whitfield family does not forget those who harm us." "Neither do I replied quietly. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to find my parents." I left them standing in the hallway and took the elevator down to the lobby. As the doors opened, I spotted my father immediately, pacing near the concierge desk, my mother beside him wringing her hands anxiously. "Jasmine," my mother cried when she saw me. "Where have you been? Everyone's been looking everywhere for you." "I know, Mom. I'm sorry." I led my parents to a quiet corner of the lobby, away from curious ears. Quickly, I explained what had happened, watching their expressions shift from confusion to shock to anger. "That son of a—" my father began, his face flushing with rage. "I'm going to kill them both," my mother declared, already turning as if to head for the elevator. I caught her arm. "No, Mom, I've handled it, but I need your support for what comes next." "What are you going to do?" my father asked, his legal mind clearly assessing options and consequences. "I'm going to tell our guests the truth, not all of it, but enough. Then I'm going to suggest that those who wish to stay can enjoy the reception anyway. There's no reason all that food and music should go to waste." My father nodded slowly. Dignified, honest, I approve. My mother looked less certain. "Are you sure you want to face all those people, sweetheart? We could make the announcement for you." "No," I said firmly. "This is something I need to do myself, for closure." 20 minutes later, I stood at the front of the Venetian room, facing rows of confused and concerned faces. My parents stood to my right, a united front of support. To my left, William and Margaret Whitfield sat stiffly, their faces frozen in polite masks that did not quite hide their distress. Martin was notably absent, as was Sophie. The room quieted as I stepped up to the microphone. 500 pairs of eyes turned toward me, expectantly waiting for an explanation for this unusual pre-wedding gathering. "Good afternoon," I began, my voice steadier than I had expected. "Thank you all for coming today. I know many of you have traveled great distances to be here, and I appreciate that more than I can express." I paused, looking out at the sea of faces, friends from law school, colleagues from my firm, relatives I hadn't seen in years, all here to celebrate what should have been the happiest day of my life. "I regret to inform you that there will be no wedding ceremony today," I continued. "Martin and I have encountered insurmountable differences that make it impossible for us to proceed with our marriage." A murmur ran through the crowd. From the corner of my eye, I could see William Whitfield shifting uncomfortably in his seat. "I want to be transparent with you all," I said, my voice gaining strength. "Earlier today, I discovered that Martin has been unfaithful to me with someone I considered a close friend. This betrayal happened not just during our engagement, but actually this morning, here in this hotel, hours before our scheduled ceremony." The murmur became a buzz of shocked whispers. Margaret Whitfield looked as though she might faint. William's face had gone from red to purple. "I am not sharing this to cause pain or create scandal," I continued, "but because I believe in truth, and because I respect all of you too much to hide behind a vague excuse about cold feet or sudden illness." I saw nods of approval throughout the room, particularly from my father's colleagues in the legal community. "That said, I see no reason why this unfortunate situation should prevent us from celebrating in another way. The reception hall is prepared, the band is ready, and the food has been paid for. I invite all of you to join me there in 30 minutes. Not for a wedding celebration, but for a gathering of friends and family who have supported me, and who I hope will continue to support me through this difficult time." A smattering of applause broke out, led by my cousin Rachel. It spread quickly, building into a sustained show of support that brought unexpected tears to my eyes. "Thank you," I said simply, stepping away from the microphone. As the crowd began to disperse, many people approached to offer hugs, words of support, or expressions of outrage on my behalf. Through it all, I maintained my composure, accepting their kindness with grace, while avoiding the temptation to share more details of Martin's betrayal. The Whitfield family had slipped out during the applause, disappearing back to Martin's suite, or perhaps even leaving the hotel entirely. I did not care. Their reactions were no longer my concern. My bridesmaids surrounded me protectively, expressing shock at Sophie's betrayal and offering various creative suggestions for revenge, most of which made me laugh despite everything. "What are you going to do with your dress?" my sister Natalie asked quietly as we walked toward the reception hall. I considered this for the first time. The custom-designed gown with its delicate lace and crystal beading had cost more than some people's cars. "I don't know," I admitted. "Donate it, maybe. I certainly will never wear it." "One thing at a time," my father advised, placing a supportive hand on my shoulder. "Today, you focus on getting through this with your head held high. Tomorrow is soon enough to worry about dresses and gifts and all the rest." The reception was surreal. The elegant ballroom was exactly as planned, with white roses and crystal decorations, creating a winter wonderland effect. The band played upbeat music instead of romantic ballads. The 5-tier wedding cake remained in the kitchen, replaced by an assortment of smaller desserts hastily arranged by the hotel staff. I moved through the crowd, accepting condolences and well wishes, declining offers to set me up with cousins, brothers, and friends, laughing more than I would have thought possible just hours earlier. The initial shock and pain had not disappeared, but they had been temporarily displaced by a strange, floating sensation of freedom. I had faced the worst betrayal imaginable and survived. I had stood up for myself in front of 500 people. Whatever came next, I knew I would handle it. As the impromptu celebration wound down, I found myself standing with my parents near the exit, saying goodbye to departing guests. "I am so proud of you," my mother whispered, hugging me tightly. "You have shown extraordinary strength today." My father nodded in agreement. "You handled an impossible situation with dignity and grace. Not many people could have done that." I leaned into their embrace, suddenly exhausted now that the adrenaline was wearing off. "Take me home," I asked, feeling like a child again. "Of course, sweetheart," my father said. "Whatever you need." As we walked through the hotel lobby toward the exit, I spotted Michael Whitfield standing near the front desk. He raised a hand in a small gesture of acknowledgement. I nodded in return, a silent exchange that somehow conveyed both an ending and a strange new beginning. The bright June sunshine outside the hotel seemed surreal after the emotional intensity of the day. As my father hailed a taxi, I took one last look at the Fairmont Copley Plaza, where my wedding should have taken place. "You know what?" I said to my mother as the taxi pulled up. "I think I'm going to be okay." She squeezed my hand. "I know you are." And in that moment, despite everything, I believed it too. The days immediately following what should have been my wedding passed in a blur of practical tasks and emotional processing. My bridesmaids helped me pack up the hotel suite, carefully avoiding mention of Sophie, whose belongings had been collected by her sister while I was addressing the wedding guests. My parents insisted I stay with them for a few weeks, setting up my childhood bedroom as a refuge from press inquiries and well-meaning but exhausting expressions of sympathy. Despite our best efforts at discretion, the story leaked. A 500-person non-wedding at one of Boston's most prestigious hotels involving a prominent family like the Whitfields could hardly remain private. By Monday morning, it was featured in the society pages of the Boston Globe, though thankfully without explicit details of Martin's betrayal. By Tuesday, I had received 17 interview requests from various news outlets, all of which I declined. The wedding gifts presented another logistical challenge. Hundreds of packages had arrived in the weeks before the ceremony, many delivered directly to our would-have-been marital home, a brownstone in Beacon Hill that Martin had purchased primarily with family money. My mother volunteered to handle returns, but I insisted on writing personal thank you notes to each gift giver, explaining the cancellation in the most gracious terms possible and expressing genuine appreciation for their generosity. "You don't have to do this," my sister argued as she watched me addressing envelopes late into the night. "No one would blame you for hiring someone to handle it." "I want to," I insisted. "These people cared enough to celebrate with us. They deserve personal acknowledgement." The routine of thank you notes became oddly therapeutic, a structured task that kept my hands busy while allowing my mind to process the seismic shift in my life. With each note completed, I felt a small measure of control returning, a reminder that although much had been taken from me, my fundamental self remained intact. My father, ever practical, suggested I consult with a colleague specializing in contract law regarding the financial aspects of the canceled wedding. The vendors had been paid in full, primarily by the Whitfields, but there were other considerations: the engagement ring, gifts already used, the down payment on the brownstone where Martin and I had planned to live. "I don't want anything from them," I said firmly. "The ring is back in Martin's possession. The house was primarily his investment. Let it go." "Are you sure?" my father pressed. "You contributed to that down payment too." "Consider it the price of learning who Martin really is before I legally bound myself to him," I replied. "It's the best money I've ever spent." 3 weeks after the non-wedding, I returned to my law firm. My colleagues were supportive, maintaining a careful balance between acknowledging what had happened and not dwelling on it unnecessarily. My caseload provided welcome distraction, complex legal problems requiring my full attention and analytical skills. In many ways, work became my sanctuary. There, I was still Jasmine Carter, respected attorney. Not Jasmine, the jilted bride, object of gossip and pity. I volunteered for extra cases, came in early, stayed late, finding comfort in the ordered world of contracts and precedents, where rules were clear and consequences predictable. My therapist, Dr. Reynolds, gently suggested this might be avoidance rather than healing. "Immersing yourself in work is a common response to trauma," she observed during one of our weekly sessions. "It provides structure and purpose when other aspects of life feel chaotic. But eventually, you need to process what happened emotionally, not just intellectually." "I'm not avoiding," I protested. "I cry in the shower every morning. I have nightmares about walking into that hotel room. I think that counts as emotional processing." "There's a difference between experiencing pain and working through it," she replied. "Have you spoken to either Martin or Sophie since that day?" I shook my head emphatically. "Absolutely not. What would be the point?" "Closure, perhaps, or at least clarity about what happened and why." "I know what happened," I said bitterly. "They betrayed me. The why doesn't matter." But of course, it did matter. In quiet moments when work couldn't distract me, the questions circled endlessly. Had Martin ever really loved me? Had Sophie's friendship been genuine? Or had she resented me all along? Could I have seen this coming? Should I have? 4 months after the canceled wedding, I received an unexpected email from Michael Whitfield. We hadn't spoken since that day at the hotel, though I had heard through mutual acquaintances that he had distanced himself from his family's business, starting his own real estate development company focused on affordable housing. I'm in town next week, he wrote. I would like to meet for coffee if you are willing. There are some things you should know. My first instinct was to decline. The last thing I needed was to reopen wounds that were finally beginning to heal, but curiosity won out, and I agreed to meet at a quiet cafe near my office. Michael arrived punctually, dressed more casually than I had ever seen him during my relationship with Martin. Gone was the bespoke suit, replaced by jeans and a simple button-down shirt. He seemed more relaxed, less the polished Whitfield air, and more an ordinary person. Thank you for meeting me, he said after we had ordered. I wasn't sure you would. Honestly, neither was I admitted. What did you want to tell me? He took a deep breath. First, that Martin and Sophie are no longer together. Whatever they thought they had fell apart within weeks after your wedding day. I suspect it was never about real feelings, just the excitement of sneaking around. I nodded, unsurprised. And second, Michael continued, Martin has been removed from the family business. My father finally realized he couldn't keep protecting him from consequences. He's working for a college friend's startup in Seattle now, starting over, I guess. I absorbed this information, searching for some emotional response within myself. Satisfaction, perhaps, or vindication. Instead, I felt only a vague sadness for the waste of it all. The relationships destroyed, the trust broken, the futures altered. All for what? A temporary thrill, a forbidden attraction that had proven as insubstantial as morning mist. There's more, Michael said. My parents wanted me to approach you about signing a non-disclosure agreement. They're still concerned about potential damage to the family reputation if more details became public. I raised an eyebrow. Are they offering financial incentive for this NDA? They were prepared to, a substantial one, but I told them not to insult you that way. I told them you'd already shown more discretion than any of us deserved. Thank you for that, I said, genuinely touched by his understanding. I also wanted to apologize again, he added, for my family's behavior that day and for not seeing what was happening before it all exploded. Martin and I may have our differences, but he's still my brother. I should have paid more attention, maybe intervened somehow. It wasn't your responsibility, I assured him. Martin and Sophie made their choices. No one else is accountable for that. We finished our coffee talking about less fraught topics. His new business venture, my recent legal cases. As we prepared to leave, Michael hesitated. One last thing, he said. My sister Catherine is getting married next spring. I know it's an enormous ask, but she was hoping you might consider attending. She always admired you, and she was horrified by what Martin did. I stared at him, astonished by the request. I can't imagine that would be comfortable for anyone involved. Probably not, he agreed, but it would mean a lot to her. Just think about it. I promised to consider it, though I was fairly certain my answer would ultimately be no. Some bridges, once burned, should remain crossed off the map. 6 months after my canceled wedding, I met Dr. James Ellison at a fundraiser for Boston Children's Hospital. He was a pediatric surgeon with kind eyes and a quiet confidence that drew me in immediately. When he asked for my number, I hesitated only briefly before giving it to him. I should probably tell you, I said during our second date, that I was supposed to get married earlier this year, but I caught my fiancé with my maid of honor on our wedding day. I waited for the awkward sympathy, the uncomfortable shift in conversation that usually followed this revelation. Instead, James nodded thoughtfully. That must have been incredibly painful, he said. How are you doing with that now? Not, I'm sorry that happened to you, or what a terrible thing, but a genuine question about my healing process. It was refreshing and unexpected. Some days are better than others, I admitted. Therapy helps, work helps, and occasionally letting myself be angry helps too. Anger is a normal response to betrayal, he said. So is sadness, confusion, even temporary relief if the relationship had underlying problems. There's no right way to heal from something like that. I studied him curiously. You sound like you speak from experience. He smiled ruefully. My ex-wife had an affair with a colleague. Not quite as dramatic as your situation, but I understand the process of rebuilding trust, both in others and in your own judgment. Our relationship developed slowly, cautiously. I was hypervigilant at first, looking for signs of deception, pulling back at the first hint of emotional unavailability. James was patient, transparent, steady. He understood my need for reassurance without taking my trust issues personally. 1 year to the day after my canceled wedding, I stood in my apartment looking out at the Boston skyline. So much had changed in 12 months. I had made partner at my firm, moved to a new apartment in a different neighborhood, and cultivated new friendships to replace the void left by Sophie's betrayal. James and I were still dating, taking things one day at a time, building something that felt real and solid. The trauma of that wedding day had not disappeared entirely. I still had moments of insecurity, flashes of pain when certain memories surfaced unexpectedly, but those moments no longer defined me or controlled my decisions. The experience had changed me, certainly, but not in the ways I had initially feared. I had worried that Martin and Sophie's betrayal would leave me bitter, unable to trust, permanently damaged. Instead, I had discovered a resilience within myself that I never knew existed, the ability to face public humiliation with dignity, the strength to rebuild when everything familiar had been swept away, the wisdom to recognize that while trust always carries risk, closing myself off from connection would be a far greater loss. If I could go back to that hotel room, to that moment of devastating discovery, would I change how I handled it? The question had haunted me for months after the non-wedding. Now, with the perspective of time, I could honestly say no. The public reckoning had been necessary, not as revenge, but as a refusal to accept the shame that rightfully belonged to Martin and Sophie. By standing in my truth, painful as it was, I had freed myself from the burden of their deception. The lessons of that day were etched into me now, not as scars, but as wisdom. Trust your intuition when something feels wrong. Value authenticity over appearance. Choose self-respect over false peace. And perhaps most importantly, understand that while betrayal reveals the character of the betrayer, how you respond to betrayal reveals your own. I was not the same woman who had excitedly prepared for her wedding day a year ago. I was stronger, wiser, more discerning. The pain had shaped me, but it had not defined me. And for that unexpected gift of growth through adversity, I was strangely, surprisingly grateful. Have you ever experienced betrayal from someone you trusted completely? How did you handle it? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you in any way, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that healing is possible, even after the deepest betrayal. Thank you for listening to my journey. And remember that sometimes the most painful endings lead to the most beautiful beginnings.